Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please find your seats. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will now call the City Council meeting to order for February 1st, 2016. Please rise for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Marler, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this beautiful city that you've given us, this beautiful state and beautiful country. We ask that you watch over us tonight as we do business in the city. Let it be fair and just for all parties. Watch over our friends in the armed forces here and abroad, for they're what keep this country safe. We ask you this in his name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it has been requested to pull consent agenda item number 6 off the agenda for this evening.
You're going to pull it for just discussion.
Yeah,
Pull it off consent.
right. Pull it off consent, and then it will be under discussion. We can do that after. We will do it right after the consent agenda. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, thank you. Okay, first order of business, proclamation for the Destin Area Chamber of Commerce Member Appreciation Day. If I could have our kind chairman, Mr. Jonathan Ox, come forward. And anyone else who's coming. I see past president Ken Wampler and anyone else that wants to come forward from the chamber. Thank you. It is truly an honor to always recognize some of our city partners, the Destin Chamber of Commerce being the number one, because the Destin Chamber of Commerce was City Hall way back when in the day, and I know there's a few of you I see out in the audience that can identify with that. But they are such an outstanding partner with the city of Destin. They provide us tremendous support, and they are always there when we need anything from this city. And we are just lucky to have such a fine, outstanding group up here and to honor the president today and all the past presidents. We are celebrating the 50th anniversary this year. I'm so excited about. But today we're here to give a proclamation and appreciation for Member Appreciation Day. Whereas the Destin Area Chamber of Commerce works with the businesses, merchants, and industries to advance the civic, economic, industrial, professional, and cultural life of the city of Destin. Whereas the Chamber directly represents its 981 members in local, state, and federal issues. Whereas the Chamber is led by an outstanding board of directors comprised of strong business leaders from our area. Whereas the Chamber is known as the foremost business organization in the Destin area. Whereas the Destin Chamber continues to be recognized for excellence across Florida by earning its Certified Chamber of Commerce designation from the Florida Association of Chamber Professionals. Whereas the Chamber is an advocate for economic development, job creation, community development that improves the quality of life for our residents. Whereas the Chamber works closely with the City of Destin on issues facing our businesses, our citizens, and our visitors. Whereas the Chamber and the City share a vision of world-class community in their mission statements. Whereas the City is proud to recognize the Chamber as it continues to support and thank its members on Member Appreciation Day. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by Destin City Council that February 4th, 2016 be designated the Destin Area Chamber of Commerce Member Appreciation Day and call upon its citizens to recognize and congratulate the Chamber representatives and its membership for their significant contributions to the city. So done this first day of February 2016, Mayor Sam Sievers. Here you go.
Thank you, Mayor Severs. So the five of us represent a small percentage of the almost 1,000 members of the Destin Chamber. Very grateful to the city and to Mayor Severs and the council for the relationship that we've enjoyed over the years. You know, this is a volunteer board, and we roll over, every year. Some of us have had several years of involvement, and some of us are, just 1 year at a time. So it's important to note that it's a smattering of the whole community that stands up here before you. Just want to say that, our goal is to continue to work with the city and, just encourage relationships together so that we can kind of bring the common good forward. And, of course, we'll always be for business, but we really appreciate your relationship. So thank you.
We've also had a special request from one of our city partners to make a surprise special presentation. So if we could please ask Ms. Marcia Hall from Maddie Kelly Arts Foundation, Ms. Deb Nisley, and Ms. Kathy Whidden to come forward.
Thank you, Mayor Severs. On behalf of the Maddie Kelly Arts Foundation, we have a special presentation to make tonight. We just concluded our 20th anniversary milestone year, and we are supported not only by our members, but by over 300 annual giving and caring volunteers that helps to sustain our operation and put on our events and education programs. So, there's outstanding volunteers, so it's really hard to narrow it down to one volunteer, but there's always one that stands out in the crowd, and there was again this last year. Probably for the last several years. Kathy Whidden is our volunteer coordinator on the board of directors, and Deb Nisley is our director of operations and co-producer of the Festival of the Arts. So it is with our pleasure that this individual be recognized and honored as the 2015 Volunteer of the Year for Maddie Kelly Arts Foundation to Destin City Councilman Jim Wood. While he's coming forward, I'll tell you that he stepped up to the plate when Kathy called, and he didn't say no, and he's held the public parking for the last few years at the Festival of the Arts, and also for our inaugural Bluegrass at the Beach. So we felt it was very appropriate to give you a clock because your time as a volunteer is very valuable, so we hope that you'll continue. So we want to recognize you for your volunteer service and contributions, and just thank you so much on behalf of our organization.
Photo bombing. He's photo bombing it.
He's recognized that he's in every picture that we take. Hey, Kathy. Give me that clock, man.
Okay. Now down to business. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Ms. Trammell?
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we approve item number 2 and 3, both minutes from December 7th and November 16th.
Okay, is there a second to that? Okay, any discussion on that item? Okay, seeing none, let's call for the vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, next item on the agenda is a public hearing for first reading of Ordinance 16-01-LC, which amends the Land Development Code by creating a new zoning district, residential office institutional, Crystal Beach residential, ROI-CBR, and rezones the Sovereign Isle neighborhood from ROI-TD to ROI-CBR. Mr. Miller, will you please read that ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 16-01-LC by title is an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to the creation of a new zoning district, ROI-CBR, and rezoning the Sovereign Isle subdivision from ROI-TD to ROI-CBR, providing for a zoning map amendment, providing for an amendment to Table 7-1, implementing zoning districts, providing for amendments to Section 7.12.06, zoning districts by creating a new zoning district, residential office institutional, Crystal Beach residential, ROI-CBR, providing for amendments to the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, Section 7.12.01A2, zoning maps to create a new zoning district, residential office institutional, Crystal Beach residential, ROI-CBR, providing for the redesignation of the Sovereign Isle neighborhood from residential office institutional tourist development, ROI-TD, to ROI-CBR, providing for the amendment of Land Development Code Section 7.12.06, zoning districts, Table 7-2, Table of Allowable Uses, providing for the amendment of Section 7.12.08, dimensional requirements, Table 7-3, Schedule of dimensional requirements, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. The ordinance is before you for consideration on first reading. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. City staff, Mr. Casella.
Mayor, City Council, what this does is two things. This was initiated by the Sovereign Isles Homeowners Association, where you had about 3/4 of the property owners petition the city to accomplish this zoning change. It is for the purpose of twofold. One is to enhance the buffering of the properties to the north of the Sovereign Isles Homeowners Association, and giving it some additional protections and buffering if that northern piece gets developed in the future. The second is that it allows, and there's an issue where the long-term residential uses were not allowed in the current zoning. So this does the two things. It gives the enhanced protection of a buffering from the commercial use property, or the more intense use properties to the north of them, as well as the makes the allowing the long-term residential consistent, and that's a number of the homes have been used for that, in addition to the short-term rentals. This had been to the LPA and it was endorsed unanimously, and we're bringing this to you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, this is a public hearing for ordinance 16-01-LC. Anyone from the public wishing to speak for or against this article, please come forward at this time and identify yourself for the record. I'll tell you what, you give me this card right now and then you can go right there. It's all right.
Travis Ralph, 4601.
Okay, hold on one second. If you'll push that button right there on the microphone and identify yourself for the record and your residence.
Travis Ralph, 4601 Woodwind Drive, Destin, Florida, 32541. Mayor, members of the board, my wife Sarah and I, we're new homeowners. We just built in Sovereign Isle, and we built there hoping to build our dream like so many other full-time residents in the community. We, along with several members of the community, which is upwards of 75% full-time residents, several small children, pushing upwards of 10 children, including our new son now, we petitioned this hoping to protect our community. The community's got a great sense of family, a great sense of community, and our fear is if we cannot increase that buffer zone and rezone this to ROI, CBR, it might hinder that family and community down the road. That commercial lot could be built with a 12-story facility if it was zoned Tier 2, and we don't feel what we're asking for is too much. The only thing I ask and I leave you with is, as you vote, you know, we understand development, we're for development, we're pro-development. Myself and my wife both have actually reached out to the council and envisioned Destin offering our services to help build Destin. But we ask that we just continue to do it with this cooperation and smartly. And as you vote, please think not only of the commerce of the area, but as mothers and as wives and husbands and fathers, and if it was your family, what you would ask for. And that's all I have to say, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate it. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak for ordinance 16-01-LC or against? Okay, seeing none, city council members, Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. Did I understand that correctly, that 76% of the property owners are objecting to this?
They're supporting it.
Okay. Mayor, I'd like to make the recommended motion.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I move that the city council accept the recommendations of the local plan agency and approve proposed ordinance 16-01-LC on first reading.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Ramswell has a second. Okay, Mr. Foreman? Okay. Mr. Wood?
Cancel.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Braden to approve on first reading ordinance 16-01-LC, seconded by Ms. Ramswell. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's call for the vote. That passes unanimously. Okay, moving on. Item number 5, second reading of ordinance 16-08-CN, which creates a utility easement to Destin Water Users, Inc. Mr. Miller, would you please read that ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 16-08-CN by title, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, creating an easement to Destin Water Users, Inc. for a portion of city property, providing for severability and providing for an effective date. The ordinance is before you for consideration on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Casella?
This is an item that you approved at your last meeting on first reading. It basically allows Destin Water Users to put infrastructure in the city's property right here in front of the dog park in a portion of the area that we're currently not using or wouldn't use, and then as well as by the public services driveway. So we'd ask for your authorization and approval of this on second reading.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against ordinance 16-08-CN, please come forward at this time and identify yourself for the record. Okay, seeing none, we'll turn it over to council members. Mr. Wood?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make the recommended motion. I move the City Council approve the attached ordinance 16-08-CN on second reading, authorize the mayor to execute the ordinance and direct the city manager to execute the easement agreement.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Foreman? Okay, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we have got a motion on the floor made by Mr. Wood to approve ordinance 16-08-CN on second reading, seconded by Mr. Foreman. With no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, now is public opportunity to speak on council propositions. I don't have any of these, so we'll move on.
Mayor, I have a question for
Yes.
Mr. Miller, if I can ask it now. It's about ordinance number 4. I mean, the public hearing for ordinance number 4.
I'm sorry, what now? About,
Number 4, item number 4.
Okay.
We did not put at the end of that motion to schedule it for second reading. Do we need to?
he read the recommended motion.
So,
Yeah, there's no requirement to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We
all
had
right.
the issue come up ministerially before, and I provided guidance that puts us in a trap if for some reason there's a publication snafu or some such.
Okay, all right, just questioning.
Okay. All right, now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Item number 7 only, request approval for use of city streets for Village Baptist Church 5K, 10K Resurrection Run on April 9th, 2016.
Make a motion for approval.
Second.
Mr. Ramswell has a second. Okay, any discussion? Okay, we've got a motion on the floor by Mr. Dixon, seconded by Ms. Ramswell to approve the use of the city street for the Village Baptist Church Run. And I will now call for the vote. That passes unanimously. Okay, now item number 6, reimbursement to Councilmember Preble Ramswell for fees and costs for legal services. Mr. Miller, was this something that you need
Yes,
to
Mayor, I could,
discuss?
with this request, I would guide the council that the authority for approving reimbursement of such fees is authorized by Section 111.07 Florida statutes. And in order to approve, the city council should make a finding of fact that the alleged misconduct arose from the performance of the councilman's duties while serving a public purpose.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we open this up for council consideration. Council members, Mr. Braden?
Thank you. I personally don't know why this is coming back around. We've already approved it one time, and I'll make the motion to approve it again the second time if we have to.
Okay, you're making that motion, sir, then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, Mr. Dixon has the second. Okay,
Mayor, the motion should include that the alleged misconduct arose from the performance of the council member's official duties and while serving a public purpose.
okay, Mr. Braden, do you want to include that in the motion?
I don't believe there was any misconduct that I'm aware of. That's what I was told, that there was no finding of that.
Yeah, you can make your motion however you see fit, and then if Mr. Dixon seconded it, you could leave it as it is if that's your desire.
My second stands.
Okay?
My motion stands.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Any further discussion? Yeah, Ms. Ramswell?
Is this, may I vote on this, or do I need to abstain again?
This item specifically in yours, to your personal
So I
gain or
need to
loss, you
abstain.
should abstain.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Ray will get the proper filings on that. Mr. Foreman?
Mayor, I'd just like to say that this was one of those administrative wrinkles that came up in the course of the council that was somewhat unprecedented, and it determined at the time that we did not have a procedure in place to deal with it. And so I think it was properly investigated. The results were found as they were, and I think we can move ahead with it and vote.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve item number 6, reimbursement to Councilmember Ramswell for fees and costs for legal services, made by Councilmember Braden, seconded by Mr. Dixon. Let's call for the vote. Okay, that passes 6 with 1 abstention. Ms. Ramswell. Okay,
Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, all the way down to project reports and comments from mayor and council, starting with Councilmember Braden.
I have none tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Ramswell?
Thank you, Mayor. I will be heading out tomorrow to Tallahassee for the League of Cities Legislative Action Days, and I believe Ms. Trammell will be going as well. This is our opportunity to speak with different representatives and senators about different issues that we're experiencing here and see how we can get them to help us with things and essentially network and really help lobby for our city. So I'm looking forward to getting down there and doing some great work on behalf of the city. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Councilmember Dixon?
Yes, I have a few things tonight. One, the first thing is that I'd like to compliment the Destin, everybody that was involved in the gumbo contest. I went, I ate gumbo until I couldn't eat anymore. It was very good, and I did enjoy myself and saw a lot of people. I think this thing is great. It has grown from the last 10 or 15 years, ever how long it's been going, but I had a good time, and I very much enjoyed it. I want to congratulate everybody involved with it. Very good job. The next thing is that if you would, I've got one thing, but go ahead and pull the boat up for me, but the next thing is that the park that was recently cleared on Main Street, and I'm talking about just up from Joe's Bayou, the end of the head of Joe's Bayou. I want to know what we're basically going to do with that, and what's our plans for it. And one thing I would like to say is that, you know, I did get a couple phone calls on this, that I'm hoping that we're going to put some sort of a fence up to buffer the property that's right next to it, that basically we went right up to a person's home there, in which we rightfully did as far as we're able to do. But I want to know what our plans are for that, and if we're going to plant grass on it to make sure we don't have erosion, that's good. But I wish we would have left a small buffer there so we wouldn't have to put a fence up. But I do think a fence is going to be in order there, so we can kind of block that property that's right there next to it. So if I could get a little bit of what's going on there, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, Lance, you want to answer that?
Yes, sir. Staff did go out there, and they, as we know, those that have seen it, they did some clearing. The only thing they removed were dead items or invasive species, and there is a plan in place to put hedges back along the existing fence on the property line there, and replace some of those invasive species with live oaks and other native species. So they're going to landscape it, maybe a little bit of retaining wall put in, and it will end up looking good. I know it looks rough right now, but if you stick with us, I think you'll be pleased.
Okay, and what about a fence to possibly go there along the back of that? Is there any plans for that? A wood fence would look great going along there.
There is an existing chain link fence, and are you suggesting we go in front of that with the wooden fence?
It would be good. I think it would look good if we could.
Okay. And that was the area where we had determined that we were going to put hedges in to create a buffer in between our park property and that residential lot next to it. But we can look into that.
The problem with hedges is that unless you buy them really big, it takes a very long time for them to get to where they actually do block anything. But to look at it now, it doesn't look that appealing, so I would like for us to look into a wooden fence of some kind that would look good there. So if we can look at that maybe and bring back to us what the estimated cost would be for something like that, I would appreciate it.
We'd be glad to do that.
All right, my next item is the boat that you see up on the screen. This boat is probably within 30 feet of our city dock that is basically waiting on a strong north wind to push it into the dock. This boat has been in this place for probably now, I'm just guessing it was sunk out a little further, but it was drug into the shallow water. It's right off our dock. It's one of the biggest eyesores that we have in that area. And I just kind of want to know when we're going to get that out of there. It's useless to nobody. I don't think anybody would complain if we pulled that thing out and got rid of it. It can't be fixed. It can't be, there's barnacles growing on it. So when do you think that we can get that boat out of there? It's embarrassing. I saw a family go out there today that had a couple of small children, and they were going to go out on the dock and do a little fishing. And for that to be there is totally embarrassing. It's the biggest eyesore we got in the bayou right now. And what can we do to expedite the process of getting that gone?
Well, that, as you know, is a derelict vessel under the state statute. The owner of that vessel is being prosecuted as we speak. We were in contact with FWC today. They're optimistic that in the next several weeks we will be cleared to remove it. But until we're cleared through the courts, it's unfortunately is a vessel that's currently owned. It is derelict under the statutes, and they are actively prosecuting the owner of that boat to either remove it. If they'll clear it, then we'll get it out of there literally within a few hours. But we did talk with FWC. We've got 2 derelict boats left in Destin for removal, this boat and then the sailboat that's on Noriga Point in the harbor.
Okay, well, let's please try to do everything we can to expedite the process.
Yeah, we are pushing them, and they're optimistic about this one. The sailboat with the mast in the harbor Unfortunately, the current owner of that boat bought it and doesn't have a title. I believe that individual is actually in the Okaloosa County Jail. So we're struggling with that particular issue. But this one is a derelict. FWC is optimistic. Hopefully in the next several weeks they'll clear it and we'll get it out of there post haste.
So we know where he is. We can go and get permission from him maybe?
They're working through, and FWC has a standing offer from the city. If the owner will give us the title, then we will remove the boat and remove it. So they know what and that's how we've been able to remove the 2 cabin cruisers and the sailboat that we got within the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that's a standing offer to FWC to any of these owners. In lieu of being prosecuted, if they'll turn the titles over to us, we'll get the boat out.
Please keep us up to date on this. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Foreman?
Yes, Mayor, I have a brief report. I'm the city's representative to the Okaloosa County Transit Cooperative. And what that involves, for a lot of people that don't know about it, the public shuttles that go up and down 98 and go to different businesses are basically in past years have been strictly a county operation. This year, the cities have invited in, and we're giving them an earful on that. It's basically what we want to do out of that is we want to take a look at the operation in its entirety, see that it services not only the workforce that the various businesses need transportation for, but also to take a serious look at the transportation of our tourists when they come into town. It's a rather big order. But we have a lot of folks working on it, and we hope in the near future to be able to start tailoring the route structure throughout the South County area and somewhat to the North County area, so that those folks that need that kind of transportation, including Eglin Air Force Base and Hurlburt, would have transportation available to them on a regular, consistent basis. And 90% of the funding for the buses and all like that comes from the federal government in grants. And the other part of it, of course, is supported by other grants and also some contribution from the county and the cities. But this is an evolving plan which we hope will significantly change public transportation. Not to mention the fact that we're looking at it will displace vehicles, cars that come into town, and if we can get them to park and stay there, and then we can move them throughout the area in public transportation, that's ideal, not to mention parking. That's my report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foreman. Appreciate it. Mr. Marlar?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I have is a couple of quick questions. Since we approved the funds for FDOT to go ahead and start on the crosswalks and stuff, when do we look at that being started?
Yeah, we're waiting at one of the attachments. I've executed the advance agreement that you authorized me to do on December the 7th. That's where you authorized us spending, advancing to FDOT the $750,000. So with the December 7th minutes that were approved tonight, that's an attachment to that contract that will be sent back to the state by the end of the week. At that point, they have committed that their goal is to have them in by Memorial Day 2016. We're working through the final design schematics of all of that. We've got one remaining issue that we're trying to work through. We think we will be able to work through that in the next day or so. So they're actually started. They've done the locates. They've got their designers. They've already designed it. So, and the equipment's been ordered. So they're planning to move post haste. So if all goes well by Memorial Day, those pedestrian signals will be installed, the 5 of them, at those locations.
Okay, and the other question is that I saw we got a letter back from the state on the comp plan. When we expect that to be back?
That will be scheduled for second reading on February 16th.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marlar. Mr. Wood?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. I'll second Tuffy's comments on the gumbo cook-off this past weekend. I was a judge for the individual gumbos and had 17 samples for that and another 10 to 12 for lunch, so I'm still gumboed out. So I love gumbo, so I'll probably have some more later on tonight. Additionally, at the last meeting, I mentioned that the Okaloosa-Walton Transportation Planning Organization was going to have a special meeting. That happened back on the 21st of January, and at that meeting, we approved an amendment to the state transportation plan that allows the $750 in federal funds to be reimbursed to the city of Destin for that same money we're fronting for the 5 crosswalks going across 98. And that had to get done in the month of January to make sure that that money was flowable so we could get reimbursed. Without that, we were not going to get reimbursed. So it's done. So hopefully, once we get the crosswalks done, we'll get our federal money back in the next, 3 years or so. So we can look forward to getting that back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Ms. Trammell?
Thank you, Mayor. I have several things tonight. Sorry about that. First one on the agenda will help Mr. Dixon with his heartburn over the derelict boats. My plan for tomorrow, believe it or not, at 9:15, I have an appointment beginning with Matt Gates, and we're going to be talking about House Bill 7025, which is related to at-risk vessels, which allows the Florida Wildlife Group to now prepare the process for vessels that are at risk of becoming derelict, and the individual officers will be able to determine if that vessel is at risk just by looking at it. They don't have to go through any kind of loopholes or process. If the vessel's taking on water, if the spaces that should be enclosed are no longer enclosed, like broken windows, etc., loose or dangerous breaking away from its anchor, which we have several of those that are in danger of running into somebody's dock. The vessel's left stored aground, unattended, in such a state that would prevent the vessel from getting underway. So there are several different categories here. I won't read them all to you, but it's going through the House and the Senate Bill 1300. So they're both working on this. It's come out of committee, and it's planned to go through the House and the Senate. So any of you that don't happen to be traveling to Tallahassee, including the people in the audience right here, you can send a comment to your House of Representatives, your senator, both Gates, Mr. and Mr. Gates, asking them to support this. It will help us with our harbor issues and our bayou issues regarding boats that are losing their status to be seaworthy. Second item on the agenda tonight, all of us got the minutes from the Harbor Community Redevelopment Agency, and there were several motions there asking us, and we will not be having a meeting between now and the end of March when we get a new council. So I'm asking that we go ahead as a council tonight and have this put on their upcoming agenda for the first meeting that they have of the Harbor CRA. And there were 3 motions made. They were asking for the staff to look at a medallion or decal program to be so they can identify which vessels are included with regards to the parking requirements, so that if there's an odd vessel down there, they know it because there's not a decal on it, kind of thing. The second item that they were asking for was the businesses that are run through the kiosk-type trailers that are no longer in use. They're taking up parking spaces, and they asked that the city look into that. None of this requires a motion, by the way. And they were also supporting the reduced speed limit in the Harbor District, and we're willing to go along with FDOT's recommendations with regard to our pedestrian crossings. So I just wanted to include that in the minutes tonight so that there would be some topics to be brought up for the first CRA meeting that comes after March. Last thing on my agenda is a little promotion tonight. This is the first annual Northwest Florida Chasing Butterflies Walk. It's going to happen on Saturday, February 27th. This is sponsored by the Northwest Florida Panhandle Turner Syndrome Society. And I happen to know of 4 people within the Destin city limits that have Turner syndrome. So we will be supporting our own in this regard, as well as there are several within our county. It's a walk around the Destin Middle School track, similar to the Relay for Life. So if anybody's interested, it's going to be happening Saturday, February 27th, at the Destin Middle School track, and sign up, registration's at 10, and the walk begins at 10:30. So just a little plug for them. This is their first annual, and they hope to have many more. And that's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you for your indulgence and your time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Trammell. I have a couple of things. First of all, I would like to wish Mrs. Davis happy 100th birthday. She's a 40-year resident in our area, and she had her 100th birthday over the weekend. So just wanted to say happy birthday to her. Again, gumbo contest, it was awesome. That benefited the Destin History and Fishing Museum. Want to thank all the folks that came out for that, and particularly want to recognize our city staff who really, they do a lot of work. Yes, there's volunteers from the museum that comes in, but it is hosted at our community center, and they do such a fabulous job, and the museum and our staff work so well together, so I wanted to thank them for that. Wanted to also announce we have the State of the City address coming up. That will be February 23rd at 5:30. The public is invited. It's at the City Hall Annex, which is where you're at today. We always have food, and really excited to get the public out. And I am going to get the distinct pleasure to tell you about everything that this wonderful group of council members and Mayor Mel Ponder and our city staff have done over the past year. And it will certainly be my pleasure to be able to tell you all those wonderful things. So I'd really like to see all of you out there and come support your city in that night. The city staff has, they always do such a special job of decorations, and they take such great pride in it, and they would love to see you all there. So that's all I have. Okay, now we are moving on to next item, staff reports and recommendation. City Attorney, Mr. Miller.
I have no items.
Okay, Mr. Shirley.
Nothing here either. Thank you.
Okay, sir. City Manager comments.
Quickly, we've talked about the second reading of the comprehensive plan. It's going to be scheduled and advertised for February 16th, which is your next meeting. That's the Monday, that's the Tuesday after because of the holiday. As we mentioned, the 5 pedestrian signals should be in the works and is being funded as we speak. The mediation that you had asked for is on the Heritage Park issue with BI Inc. is scheduled for February 19th, so hopefully we'll have something to report back to you at your first meeting in March. So the Heritage Run pump station that is funded in part by city dollars of about $500,000, as well as that state appropriation of $500,000. Those bids come in Thursday, February 4th, so hopefully we'll get good bids. We can get that awarded. If we can't get it awarded on the February 16th, for sure the first meeting in March, and then be able to get that project constructed, and that would be a big help, not just to those residents and property owners down there, but to relieve potential flooding in that overall drainage basin. So that's all that I have for you tonight. So.
Okay.
Well, we do have. Yeah, I'm sorry. We do have the first quarter financials. We presented you the quarter, the operating revenues, and we also have representatives from Raymond James that can talk to you about our investments that we've got invested, approximately about $10 million invested with them, which is our reserves. We will be liquidating some of those reserves to be able to the advance fund, the pedestrian signals. But if you have any questions, we have city staff here and/or representatives from Raymond James that can answer those questions.
Okay, City Council, any questions on that item? Okay, seeing none, thank you, and thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Casella, you want to go over item B, credit card policy for elected officials?
Yeah, you had asked us, I think about a month ago, I think it was Counselor Foreman made the motion, it was seconded and approved. One of the recommendations from the state attorney was to consideration of the adoption of a purchasing card policy, credit card policy for the mayor and city council members. So what we have before you is it is somewhat tailored after the policy that we have for city employees. In addition, what we did was we took the additional step of referring this item over to the city's external auditor from an internal control standpoint, and they made a couple suggested changes to enhance the internal controls. So we've given you the policy. Now this would be basically in effect for any individual of the elected officials who choose to take a credit card, purchasing card, and then that would be basically the protocol to how that card is to be used and so forth. So we presented to you for your consideration and comments and whatever you would like to proceed with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casella. I do have one question for Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, normally when we adopt certain policies to this nature, we do it by ordinance. And I noticed the recommended motion is just that we adopt this.
There's not a requirement for it to be an ordinance.
It doesn't on this one?
No,
Okay, thank you.
It's ministerially, it's ministerial, so you could have it adopted by resolution, but
Is it
this
necessary?
action is adequate.
Okay, it is. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, council members. Mr. Foreman.
Yes, Mayor, I stated earlier my thoughts on the process that brought us to this point, and that's basically that we went along without having any specific policy, and I've read the policy that we're looking at tonight, and I think it's a very good one. I think if it's used properly or used by the people who use the credit cards, that it's going to solve the problem. So I make the recommended motion. I move the council adopt the, quote, mayor and city council purchasing card policy, unquote.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, Ms. Ramswell. Okay, next up, Mr. Dixon.
Please, council, I was going to make a motion.
Okay, thank you. Next, Ms. Trammell.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. I've got too many pieces of paper around here. I had some questions within the policy that I wanted to ask and get clarified. And I'll move them over here. Number one, under the purpose, it says any authorized vendor. Now, I understand that from city staff, you have authorized vendors that you deal with any other time. But as far as a council goes, we're not purchasing stuff, so to speak. Basically, this was designed for travel, and so I'm not sure I understand, other than a hotel or some kind of form of transportation, I'm not sure that we shouldn't identify that.
But that's basically, anybody that takes the card would be considered to be a vendor.
Correct. It could be registration for a conference, and it could be anything. And vendors kind
Okay,
of.
so if they're selling something at the League of Cities, like mats for the beach or whatever.
No.
But we don't say that, and they'll take my credit card. So that's why I'm saying, I think that part needs to be clarified. And then I was questioning, they give a copy of the tax exempt form to each vendor, because I know when you register at a hotel, you need it, when you do a whatever. So I think we need, instead of just say to vendor, maybe we need to say to each vendor, so one is not do all kind of thing. With regard to looking at a counselor and the purchases that a counselor would make during a travel event, I'm not sure that there are accidental purchases, because you have the city clerk in this regard making your reservations for you, so you're handing that card in at the hotel or whatever you're doing. So I'm not sure The accidental purchases clause applies to counselors in that regard. And who determines the loss of privileges? If you're looking at this, it says that if you accidentally do something, the loss of privileges or whatever, who determines that? Do they have to come before council and be hand slapped on the dais? I mean, that just isn't pretty. If you make a mistake, I don't know, because we're governing ourselves here. Staff is not governing us, and we're governing ourselves, and I want it clear as to how we're going to do that if we're going to adopt this policy.
If you look on page 206, it says card processing procedures.
Yes.
It's designed that we get the credit card, purchasing card invoices by either the last day of the month or the first day of the month. And then we require reconciliation of that card by the 7th. If we find that there have been prohibited purchases that are not basically resolved by the 7th day of the month, under this policy, I'm simply to advise the mayor and city council of the unreimbursed charges.
So the loss of privileges or any of the other items would be determined by council at a council meeting?
That's right.
Well, I think that needs to be written in there, make it clear. And who would be the department purchasing card representative for counselors?
Basically be the city clerk.
Okay, we need to put city clerk in there instead of department purchasing card representative, because if I'm signing as to who I need to go to, that doesn't tell me anything. City clerk tells me who to go to. Does that make sense? And under item number 6, travel-related charges that are, I guess, not allowed, I would include room entertainment, meaning movies, because that's about all the room entertainment, and games and whatever else there is in there, because that goes under your room, that goes under incidentals for a room. So anyway, and I don't understand why we would have a back order.
Because you could possibly register for a conference that's 2 months away that they don't take a registrate, they cancel, and so they hold your credit card for rescheduling, and we don't want that type of thing to come through on our card. This policy is not going to cover 100% of all the incidents that you're talking about. It's a policy that's designed to use your good judgment and to give you some guidance on how to use the card. I can't anticipate every use. I think we tried to put together a policy that would allow you to use your good judgment as well as give you guidance, and we can tweak it whatever ways you would like. But some of those terms, like the term of vendor, is a generalized term to cover everything, not to be too specific, so that you can say, I did this, but not this.
Well, for staff, it's pretty.
Ms. Trammell?
Yes.
There's a lot of little things that you're asking to be changed in this. You can do a substitute motion, and if you want to add all these items in there and see if you get a second on that. I just asked Mr. Foreman if he wanted to change his motion, and he does not. So in order to get all these little things on record, if you want them changed, if you'd like to make a substitute motion, you can do that.
Then I'll make the substitute motion to include those items that I listed, that I specified.
And you have that in writing to give to?
I have my notes.
Okay.
Yes.
You can give them. Okay. Is
We
there?
would need to have the policy draft, have those items inserted into the policy draft.
Well, then I will remove my motion, and I will identify myself as not supporting a credit card policy for the city.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Ramswell?
Sure. I just wanted to get clarification on the 7th day of the month. This is a little confusing to me, and I just want to make sure I understand. It says, if by the 7th day of the month, all okay, wait, that's not the right spot. Sorry. At some point, okay. While personal purchases, this is page 2 of 6, while personal purchases on the city card is strictly prohibited, if a personal purchase is accidentally made, the mayor or council member is expected to reimburse the city by the 7th day of the month the charge shows up on the individual statement. So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but a 7th day of the month, the charge shows up on the statement. So if the statement comes in on the 6th or the 7th, then it would be due that day.
The statement always comes out on the 1st, always.
Okay, that makes sense then. I didn't know that.
Mr. Casella, use your
Yeah,
microphone.
we either get it the last day of the month or the first. That then gives us the ability to reconcile that, get it into finance for them to do what they do so they can get the purchasing card paid for. So that's why the 7th day is in there, because that gives almost a week to be able to identify any issues.
Perfect, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wood?
Yes, ma'am. I was just wondering, since Ms. Trammell withdrew her substitute motion, if we could entertain a substitute motion to table this tonight and allow Ms. Trammell to get her points with staff included and bring it back at the next meeting.
My advice to you would be to
Not to.
continue the item, not
Okay.
to table it.
That would be right,
But
correct.
you can do whatever you would like, but
Continue is the right word. Thank you.
Mr. Foreman, you made the original motion. Use your microphone.
I've got to do that. So I amend my motion to continue the consideration of this motion until the next meeting and to draft a change that would incorporate the changes that Ms. Trammell stated.
I would actually I would withdraw your
Continue.
motion and then make a new motion to continue the item.
Okay, I withdraw my motion and I make a new motion to continue consideration of this policy until the next meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Wood. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we've got a motion on the floor by Mr. Foreman, seconded by Mr. Wood to continue the credit card policy for elected officials until the next meeting, I would assume. Very good.
Question,
All right.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The original request to the city manager suspended the use of the cards until this policy was adopted. That's still in effect? Okay.
Okay. Oops.
Let me, Councilor Trammell will not be here on the February 16th meeting. So,
So we can continue it to the following meeting? What is that, March, what is that date?
6th or 7th? I don't have my,
So continue it to March 7th?
I mean, I know there's a motion on the floor and all that, but some of the changes, I mean, I think if you want to tweak, the issue of, prohibited, purchases to include room entertainment, I mean, we can come up with another word for vendor if that makes you more comfortable.
Could we possibly, Mayor, may I speak?
Yeah.
Okay,
Please, go
sorry.
ahead.
Could we possibly make, I didn't see any critical changes that Ms. Trammell made to the policy that basically change the policy. I would be willing to incorporate those changes into the existing document and to approve it based upon those changes being made.
That's where we were at to begin with, so yeah, to see if you wanted to accept those.
Well, that's, somebody else made that statement.
Only if he would have accepted the items that you said in changing.
No, ma'am, we'd still need a written document. It is the document you're
Yes.
approving, so either way the motion came down, it'd still require that change in writing.
In the end. Well, it still comes back then. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to continue this item, and we can put it at the first meeting in March, if that's up to all of you. Yes, who's, Mr. Dixon? Is that you? We were voting. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can a substitute motion be the recommended motion? And the reason I ask that is because, you know, we can make tweaks to this as we go along. I think Ms. Ramswell is wanting to, or not wanting to, she needs to go out of town tomorrow. And we've basically got the credit card suspended as we are right now. And I just don't think it's fair that we would delay this thing because now she's going to have to use her personal credit cards and get reimbursed for it. So can I make a substitute motion to allow this to continue and then to tweak it as we see fit? We can tweak it 20 times in 20 different meetings. So is that a possibility?
You can make a motion if you like to.
Well, there's a motion on the-
Mr. Miller?
Mayor, let
You're
me
waving
see
at
if
me.
let me see if we can help you. If you adopt the proposal that's before you tonight, you can always follow up with amendments to it.
Yes, you can.
But since there's a motion on the floor,
Well,
wouldn't this
you
be a
would-
substitute?
No, you just asked that person to withdraw that motion.
Motion to continue.
I got to tell you, I don't remember who made it.
Mr. Foreman.
Mr. Foreman.
Mr. Foreman.
Mr. Foreman, would you withdraw your motion?
To continue?
Yes.
Okay, I will withdraw my motion to continue and go back to the original motion.
Okay, and the motion on, if that is the
It's the
case.
recommended motion.
Ms. Ramswell, you seconded his original. Do you want to do that?
Oh, yes, I'll go ahead
Okay.
and yes.
Now, it's back on the floor. Council members?
All right, and so did he make the motion or do I need to
Nope.
make the motion?
The motion
Okay,
is on the floor. The recommended motion, we've got a first and a second. Let's call for the vote. Voting.
Yes. I tell you, that got confusing. Oh, sorry.
Yes, you're voting. Okay, that passes 6-1 with Ms. Tramble dissenting on that item.
And for the record, I have to use my own credit card tomorrow anyway.
Okay, moving on. We have comments from the audience. Come forward and please identify yourself for the record, sir.
Shane Moody, President and CEO of the Destin Chamber. They've got a poll on the back row at what time this was going to end. It's getting close to my time, so I'm just delaying so I can win the money. Now, I wanted to come forward on January the 23rd. We had our 6th annual Bayou Bay and Beach 5K, 10K half marathon. Mayor, you talked about at the beginning of this meeting the partnership. That's an event that could not happen without the partnership of the city. I want to commend your recreation department, namely Nick Coleman, who was your Employee of the Year. He volunteers his time. Lance won't pay him, so he comes out and volunteers his time. He gets there at about 3 o'clock in the morning and starts putting out cones and signs and marking the roads. And Doug Rayner was there with him this year that early as well. Doug's getting in his volunteer hours for Destin Forward, our community education and leadership program that Doug's going through this year. So again, thanks to the city. Without you, we couldn't do that. It's been a great 6-year partnership, and we look forward to it continuing next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir. Mr. Wu, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. The one on the little thing.
I need
There you
that.
go.
Good evening, council. Thank you very much. And before I start in, happy Chinese New Year's.
Oh, yeah.
There's a big American celebration coming up on the 7th as well.
Year of the monkey.
Now, what I've been asked to do from the Kokomo Cove Homeowners Association is to come to you and let you know that 15 of the houses are sitting in water. The lake over in Destiny East, Five Fingers Lake, and the one across from the crab trap has risen, and one of the houses will soon be in water. We know that the Destiny East Homeowners Association has requested permits to start pumping out, and I've been asked to ask the council if you could, and the city, expedite matters and ease the feelings of the homeowners.
Yes, sir. I'll tell you what, if I may, I know we are on this because we talked about that at the beginning of last week. Mr. Campbell or Mr. Casella, do you want to speak to this item?
Yeah, I think
It's
Mr.
already being
Yeah,
handled.
Mr. Campbell can give a better historical than I can.
The last time this happened was in April of 2014. We had essentially a 200-year storm event. It affected both of the lakes, one near Kokomo Cove and the other Destiny, Four Prong Lake and the lake that Mr. Wu was talking about. They're both closed basins. They have no outfalls, no discharge points. So what water enters stays there, especially when we have these large rains. And in this case, we've had continuing rain for the last 4 months, and the water table has risen. Last time, in April of 14, we were able to pump Four Prong Lake from the crab trap. That stormwater system is connected to that large lake. And we were able to get a permit from, actually Destiny got the permit from the from DEP for an emergency discharge to the Gulf of Mexico. And we literally pumped that for over 6 weeks to drain it less than a foot. But we were able to get the water down below the road elevations and out of the people's yards and out of the people's houses. And we had 2 pumps going. One of the residents from Destiny West was able to permit through the Corps of Engineers, through DEP, to pump down the lake that Mr. Wu is speaking of. And they got a permit from the city to cross the road with 6-inch pipe under ramps, go across private property and out to the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, there's no longer a place to pump because a house has been built on that lot. So we have a situation where it's difficult to find a place to discharge that water. We don't anticipate a large rain event this week. I don't believe that it's in any of the houses. I know it's very close. Never say never. We've seen these rain events, for the last 3 years. Destiny East is currently pumping Four Prong Lake. I believe the elevations are such that Destiny West, if the lake Mr. Wu is speaking of, will overflow and go into Four Prong Lake. So therefore, it gives that water a place to go prior to entering any houses. In the meantime, I've been working with the gentleman from Destiny West to see if we can get the smaller lake pumped out. And so far, we haven't come to any solution, but we're continuing to work on it, and we're continuing to monitor the weather. Obviously, if we see a large storm event coming, all hands on deck. We've done this before, and we can do it again.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Thank you for your work on that. I remember going through this a couple times before, so thank you for that. And possibly could Mr. Wu and Mr. Campbell exchange information after the meeting, keep you updated. Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Yes, sir. Mr. Tadlock.
Madam Mayor and councilors, I'm Guy Tadlock. I live in Destin. Just briefly, I'd like to comment. Certainly agree with Councilman Dixon about the embarrassment of the derrick boats, and certainly appreciate everything that he's done as well as staff in getting those vessels out of there, because it is an embarrassment. During the 100 days of summer, we have hundreds of people ride the tour boats throughout Destin Harbor, and typically we'll have 3 or 4 derrick boats somewhere. So I'd like to think that, and I think this is probably at least the second, maybe 3 times, that a counselor has had to bring this up. I know Captain Wines brought it up several years ago and said the harbor had turned into a junkyard. But I hope that we have procedures in place now, and maybe the bar set now, so that this council doesn't have to bring that up to staff again. But there's something else that, to me, is very embarrassing for the city. It certainly was embarrassing for me. There was alleged misuse of a credit card. And I think this whole thing was unfortunate, but the state attorney's office came down and did an investigation. Mr. Foreman very eloquently said that there was no fault found. Yet, this came up in at least 3, maybe 4 city council meetings. It's certainly an embarrassment to this council person. I read the report from the state attorney's office, and the only thing that he found wrong was the city didn't have a policy in place. Yet this council person received unending embarrassment. And I think you counselors, as being our elected officials, I hope that it embarrassed you as well, because it could have happened to you as well. I'd like to suggest that each of you, as you work with city staff, if you work with the 2 people sitting on the end of this dais, that you ask how this happened and what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because in the public works and the civilian side of things, executives that cry wolf, and there's not a wolf, they don't survive that very many times. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else in the audience? Okay, Ms. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Eric Thomas from Destin. And we had a motion at our last meeting where we were going to talk about zoning of the south side of 98 by Holiday Owl for potential grocery store, and it was put towards today. Did we?
That's not on the agenda. That was pulled from the agenda.
Oh, okay.
The meeting before, and it has not been re-agended.
Oh, okay, because it was, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Okay, anyone else? Okay, before you leave, it is foggy outside, so please be very, very careful as you're leaving. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. This meeting's adjourned.